Juliana Greene had exactly 20 minutes to reach the presentation that would determine her entire career when a Mafia boss splashed coffee all over her cream silk blouse, abandoned his crucial business meeting to help her, and gave her his $3,000 custom suit to wear instead. Sometimes the worst moments of your life are actually the universe pushing you toward your destiny. The morning had started exactly according to plan, which in hindsight should have been the first warning sign because Juliana's life didn't do perfect mornings. She'd woken at 6, showered, straightened her natural hair into sleek professional waves that had taken 45 minutes and enough product to stock a salon, and put on the outfit she'd been planning for 3 weeks. Cream silk blouse from Nordstrom. $250 she absolutely could not afford but had bought anyway because this presentation mattered. Black pencil skirt that hit just below the knee. Heels that made her 3 inches taller and gave her the illusion of being the kind of woman who belonged in executive meetings. Makeup applied with precision, understated but polished. The look of someone who had their life completely together, even though her bank account told a very different story. She was presenting the Reynolds Cosmetics campaign to the partners at Apex Creative Agency, the marketing firm where she'd been working as a senior account executive for 3 years. This was the promotion, the big one. The senior marketing director position that came with an actual livable salary, instead of paycheck-to-paycheck anxiety and roommate drama. The one that meant health insurance without a $5,000 deductible. The one that proved she belonged at the table despite graduating from a state school nobody had heard of, while surrounded by colleagues with Ivy League degrees and family connections. The presentation was at 10 o'clock sharp at the Apex offices in Brickell. But the partners were staying at the Fontainebleau, Miami Beach for a conference, and she'd arranged to meet them in one of the hotel's business suites before they headed to the main office. She'd left her apartment in Wynwood at 8:45 to account for Miami traffic, parking nightmares, and the general chaos that was getting anywhere in this city on a Monday morning. She'd made it to the Fontainebleau by 9:35, early, perfect. She was cutting through the hotel's massive marble lobby, because it was faster than going around the parking structure, and also because the lobby was stunning and walking through it made her feel successful even when she was catastrophically broke. She was mentally rehearsing her opening pitch, phone in hand, reviewing slide notes she'd perfected at 2 in the morning when sleep had been optional and anxiety had been winning. She didn't see him coming. Jordon Belvin was having the kind of morning that made him seriously reconsider every life choice that had led him to this exact moment. He was 18 minutes late for the most important meeting he'd had in 6 months. His second-in-command, Marcus, was calling him every 45 seconds with increasingly creative variations of, "Where the hell are you?" And the Castellano family was going to take his lateness as a sign of disrespect, which could torpedo 6 months of careful negotiation and potentially start a territorial conflict that would cost both organizations millions. The peace talks had taken half a year to arrange. Territory disputes over the port of Miami, old grudges between families, the kind of organizational politics that made corporate boardroom drama look simple. Both families wanted to avoid open conflict. Conflicts were bad for business, drew law enforcement attention, disrupted operations. But conflicts happened when people felt disrespected, and Jordon was currently 18 minutes late to a meeting where punctuality was a sign of good faith. He'd been on the phone with Marcus trying to explain why he was late, which involved a conversation with his mother that had gone 30 minutes longer than expected because Rosa Belvin didn't do short conversations. She did full interrogations disguised as maternal concern. "Mijo, you work too much," she'd said over breakfast in the hotel restaurant, blocking his exit with the skill of someone who'd raised 4 children and knew every escape tactic. "When are you going to find a nice girl? Settle down. I want grandchildren before I'm too old to enjoy them. Ma, I have a critical meeting in 15 minutes. A meeting is more important than your mother?" It was a trap, and he'd known it, but had walked into it anyway because you didn't win arguments with Rosa Belvin. "No, but this meeting has been 6 months in the making, and if I'm late, you're always working. Your father, God rest his soul, he worked too much too. Look where it got him, dead at 65 from a heart attack because he never took time to live. Is that what you want? You want me to bury another man I love because he couldn't slow down?" He'd finally extracted himself with promises to think about finding someone, and was now moving through the Fontainebleau lobby at a pace just short of running. Phone pressed to his ear, Marcus on the other end delivering a detailed assessment of how badly this delay was going. "I'm 5 minutes away," Jordon said, which wasn't true. He was more like 2 minutes away, but Marcus was already stressed enough. "Tell Castellano's people I apologize for the delay. Family emergency. Unavoidable. They're not gonna like it, boss. Punctuality was part of the respect protocol we agreed on." "I know. I'll make it right when I get there. Just keep them calm." Jordon was moving fast, his attention split between Marcus's voice in his ear and mentally calculating how to salvage the meeting, his expensive Italian espresso growing lukewarm in his other hand. The lobby was moderately crowded with hotel guests and conference attendees, but he navigated through them with practiced efficiency, his mind already in the conference room, already formulating his apology and how to re-establish authority after showing up late. He didn't see her until his shoulder caught her arm. The collision happened in what felt like slow motion but was actually less than 2 seconds. Jordon's shoulder made contact with Juliana's elbow just as she turned from checking her phone. The coffee cup, still 3/4 full of hot liquid, flew from his grip in a perfect arc. Juliana looked up just in time to see the dark liquid descend toward her in what might as well have been a horror movie slow-motion sequence. The coffee hit her cream silk blouse dead center, spreading across the expensive fabric like a stain designed by the universe specifically to ruin her life. Hot liquid soaked through immediately, the dark brown stark against the cream. Impossible to hide, impossible to fix, destroying 3 weeks of planning and $250 she couldn't afford to lose in approximately 1.5 seconds. For one frozen moment, they both stared at the damage. Juliana's perfect professional outfit was ruined. Her carefully constructed confidence was dripping onto the marble floor along with the coffee. Her career-defining presentation was in 20 minutes, and she looked like she'd lost a fight with a vending machine. Then she looked up at the man who'd just destroyed everything, and saw a face that was equal parts sharp intelligence, controlled power, and genuine horror at what he'd done. "I am so sorry," Jordon said, and his voice carried the kind of authority that suggested he didn't apologize often, and didn't do it lightly. His eyes took in the ruined blouse, the presentation folder in her hand, the devastation written across her face, and something in his expression shifted. Not pity, recognition. The immediate understanding that he'd just caused a disaster for someone whose day was clearly as high stakes as his own. "How important is whatever you're dressed for?" he asked, his tone direct, already calculating solutions. "It's the most important presentation of my career," Juliana said, her voice tight with barely controlled panic, and the very real urge to either cry or scream, or possibly both. "I have 20 minutes to convince the partners at my firm that I deserve a promotion I've been working toward for 3 years, and I just got covered in coffee. So, pretty important." Jordon's mind worked with the speed that had made him successful in a business where slow decisions got people killed. The Castellano meeting was critical. 6 months of negotiation, potential violence if handled wrong. Marcus and his team were waiting. Being late was bad enough. Missing it entirely could have serious consequences. But this woman's career was ending in real time because of his carelessness, and something in her devastated expression hit him in a way business calculations never had. Maybe it was the way she was fighting not to cry. Maybe it was recognizing the high stakes in someone else's crisis. Maybe it was his mother's voice still echoing in his head about his father working himself to death and never taking time for what mattered. Maybe it was just that for the first time in his adult life, Jordon Belvin looked at a situation and didn't immediately calculate the business cost. He just saw someone who needed help that he could provide. "Come with me," he said, already moving toward the elevators, making a decision that would change both their lives. "I'm going to fix this." "There's no time to fix this," Juliana protested. But she was following him because what other choice did she have? Her presentation was in 20 minutes. She couldn't show up like this, and this stranger was offering a solution with the kind of certainty that made her want to believe him despite every rational thought screaming that this was insane. "There's always time to fix what matters," Jordon said, pulling out his phone to make a call that was going to cost him significantly. "Marcus, change of plans. I need you to call Castellano's people. Tell them I have an emergency, and I'm going to be 45 minutes late. Yes, I know what that means for the negotiation. Yes, I know we agreed on punctuality. Do it anyway." Juliana stared at him as they stepped into the elevator, her mind struggling to process what was happening. "You're ditching something important for me? For a stranger?" "I'm fixing what I broke," Jordon said, meeting her eyes with an intensity that made her breath catch, despite the disaster currently soaking through her blouse. "Trust me for 20 minutes. I promise you'll make your meeting." What Juliana didn't know was that the man offering to help her was one of the most powerful and dangerous figures in Miami's criminal underworld, that his meeting involved negotiating territory with a rival organization, and that helping her was the first time in his life he'd prioritized a personal impulse over business strategy. What Jordon didn't know was that helping this stranger in a ruined silk blouse would be the decision that finally made him break his father's most sacred rule, the one that had governed his entire life, that business always came first. The elevator doors closed, and both their carefully planned mornings became something entirely different. Sometimes disasters aren't actually disasters. Sometimes they're just the universe's extremely dramatic way of introducing you to your future. If you're already invested in what happens next, if you're wondering whether Juliana will make it to her presentation, or if this coffee disaster will actually turn into something beautiful, then you're exactly the kind of reader I write for. Subscribe now so you never miss a moment of this story. You'll get every new chapter delivered directly to you, plus access to other powerful stories about unexpected meetings, complicated choices, and love that arrives in the most chaotic ways. The elevator ride to the penthouse felt both endless and far too short. Juliana stood with her arms wrapped around herself, the coffee-soaked blouse cold and sticky against her skin, her mind racing through the impossibility of her situation. 20 minutes. She had 20 minutes to somehow salvage this disaster, get to the Apex Business Suite, and deliver the most important presentation of her career, looking like she'd been attacked by a caffeinated tornado. "This is insane," she said, more to herself than to Jordon. "I don't even know you. I don't know why you're helping me. I don't know what you think you can possibly do in 15 minutes that will make this okay. I'm going to give you something to wear," Jordon said simply, watching the floor numbers climb with the kind of focused intensity that suggested he made high-stakes decisions under pressure regularly. "You're going to walk into that presentation looking more expensive than anyone else in the room, and you're going to be brilliant. I can't just wear your clothes. That's the only option that gets you to your meeting on time," Jordon interrupted, his tone leaving no room for argument. "Unless you have a better plan in the next 12 minutes. Juliana didn't have a better plan. She didn't have any plan. Her carefully constructed morning had imploded, and she was following a stranger to his penthouse, because the alternative was showing up to the most important meeting of her career, looking like she'd lost a fight with a coffee pot. The elevator reached the penthouse floor and Jordon was already moving, his stride purposeful as he led her down a hallway that probably cost more per square foot than her entire apartment. He unlocked a door and ushered her into a space that made her temporarily forget about the disaster. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking Biscayne Bay, furniture that looked like it belonged in an architecture magazine, art on the walls that was either very good or very expensive or both. "Wait here," Jordon said, already heading toward what she assumed was a bedroom. "I'll be right back." The moment he disappeared, Juliana pulled out her phone and called Nicole, her best friend and the only person who would understand the absolute chaos of this situation. "Jules, aren't you supposed to be in your presentation right now? I got coffee spilled all over my blouse by a stranger who is now in another room finding me something to wear in his penthouse, and I have 11 minutes before I need to leave and I think I'm having a breakdown." "Okay, backing up. A stranger's penthouse? Are you about to be murdered? Should I call someone?" "I don't think so. He seems..." Juliana paused, trying to find words for the man who'd just upended her morning. "Professional. Intense. Really sorry about the coffee. Also possibly insane for helping me, but I don't have time to analyze that right now. If you're not back in an hour, I'm calling the police." Jordon returned before Juliana could respond, carrying what looked like a garment bag. "This should work," he said, hanging it on the back of a nearby chair and unzipping it to reveal a suit that probably cost more than her monthly rent. Custom-tailored, charcoal gray with subtle pinstripes, the kind of thing that screamed power and money and absolute confidence. "I can't wear your suit," Juliana said, even though part of her brain was already calculating how quickly she could change. "You can and you will," Jordon said, his tone brooking no argument. "Bathroom is through that door. You have 8 minutes. Go." Juliana grabbed the suit and her presentation folder and practically ran toward the bathroom, her mind spinning with questions she didn't have time to ask. Who was this man? Why was he helping her? What kind of meeting was he abandoning that made him call someone named Marcus with instructions to handle the Castellano situation? And why did part of her, despite the chaos and the coffee and the complete insanity of this morning, feel like maybe this disaster was exactly what she needed? The bathroom was marble and chrome, and probably cost more than her car. Juliana locked the door, stripped off the ruined blouse with shaking hands, and stared at herself in the mirror. Her bra was coffee-stained. Her carefully straightened hair was starting to frizz from stress sweat. She had 6 minutes. The suit was absurdly large on her. The jacket sleeves hung past her fingertips, the shoulders drooped, and the pants would have fallen straight off if she'd even attempted them. But the fabric was incredible. Butter-soft wool that probably came from some exclusive Italian mill. And when she rolled the sleeves to her wrists and buttoned the jacket, something shifted. She caught her reflection and stopped breathing for a second. The jacket hit mid-thigh like an expensive blazer dress, the tailoring so precise that even oversized it somehow worked. The charcoal gray with subtle pinstripes made her look powerful, established, like someone who belonged in rooms where decisions worth millions were made. She kept her own skirt and heels, added the jacket, and suddenly she wasn't Juliana Greene from a state school nobody had heard of. She was someone who commanded attention. She emerged from the bathroom to find Jordon on his phone, pacing near the windows. He looked up when she entered and something flickered across his face. An expression she couldn't quite read, but that made her pulse quicken despite the time pressure and the absolute insanity of this morning. "That works," he said, his voice carrying a note of satisfaction. "Better than your original outfit, actually. It's your $3,000 suit," Juliana said, doing a small turn that was half nervous energy and half genuine appreciation for how the fabric moved. "Of course it works. Though I'm pretty sure I look like a kid playing dress-up in her father's closet." "You look like someone who owns every room she walks into," Jordon corrected, and the certainty in his voice made her believe him. "The partners at your firm are going to see that suit and immediately recalculate their assumptions about who you are and what you're worth." Juliana checked her phone. 4 minutes. She should leave right now, should run out the door with a quick thank you and never look back. Instead, she found herself asking the question that had been building since the elevator. "Why are you doing this? You don't know me. You're missing something important. What meeting are you abandoning right now?" Jordon was quiet for a moment, his dark eyes holding hers with an intensity that made the luxurious penthouse feel suddenly smaller, more intimate. "Business negotiation. Territory dispute. 6 months of careful planning that's probably falling apart as we speak because I'm not there." "Then why aren't you there?" "Because my father spent his entire life putting business first," Jordon said, his voice carrying an edge of something raw and honest. "Died at 65 from a heart attack, because he never took time to just be human, to help someone because it was the right thing to do, not because it served a strategic purpose. And this morning I looked at you in your ruined blouse and your career ending in real time, and I just thought, what's the point of all the power and the planning if I can't use it to help someone who needs it?" Juliana felt something shift in her chest, a recognition of shared understanding. "You're choosing me over your business deal." "I'm choosing to be someone my father never was," Jordon said quietly. "Someone who doesn't calculate the cost of doing the right thing." For a moment they just stood there, two strangers whose mornings had collided into something neither had planned, connected by coffee and chaos and a choice that felt more significant than either of them was ready to acknowledge. "I need to go," Juliana said, but she didn't move. "You need to go," Jordon agreed, but he stepped closer. "The suit looks good on you. Powerful. Like armor." "It feels like armor," Juliana admitted. "Like I could walk into that meeting and demand anything." "Then demand everything," Jordon said. "And when you're done conquering your morning, call me. I want to know how it goes." He handed her a business card with a single phone number. No name, no title. Juliana took it, her fingers brushing his for just a second, and felt a jolt of electricity that had nothing to do with static, and everything to do with the man standing too close in his penthouse while she wore his suit like borrowed confidence. "Thank you," she said, meaning it for more than just the suit. "For seeing that this mattered. For helping when you had no reason to." "I had every reason to," Jordon said, and the way he looked at her made Juliana think that maybe disasters really were just the universe's dramatic way of introducing you to your future. She left the penthouse wearing his armor, feeling invincible, and didn't look back. Juliana walked into the Apex business suite at exactly 9:58, 2 minutes early despite the coffee catastrophe and the penthouse detour and the complete implosion of her carefully planned morning. The partners were already seated around the polished conference table. 3 men in their 50s who held her entire career in their perfectly manicured hands. Richard Chen looked up first, his eyes tracking from her face down to the clearly oversized charcoal suit jacket, the rolled sleeves, the expensive fabric that was obviously not hers. Juliana saw the question forming on his face and made a split-second decision to own the chaos rather than apologize for it. "Gentlemen, thank you for your time this morning," she said, her voice steady and strong as she set up her laptop. "I had a minor wardrobe disaster on the way here, involving an unfortunate encounter with someone's coffee. Fortunately, I met a very generous stranger who insisted I borrow his suit, rather than miss this meeting. So if I look like I'm playing dress-up, that's because I technically am. But I promise the presentation inside this borrowed armor is 100% mine." The honesty disarmed them. Richard actually smiled. "Well, you certainly made an entrance. I prefer to think of it as demonstrating problem-solving under pressure," Juliana said, and launched into her presentation before anyone could respond. The Reynolds Cosmetics campaign had been her baby for 6 months. Market research, target demographics, social media strategy, influencer partnerships, budget projections down to the dollar. She'd lived and breathed this campaign, and now she presented it with a confidence that had nothing to do with the expensive suit and everything to do with finally feeling like she deserved to be in this room. She talked about reaching millennial and Gen Z consumers through authentic storytelling rather than traditional advertising. She showed mock-ups of Instagram campaigns that felt genuine rather than corporate. She presented data that proved her strategy would deliver a 23% increase in brand engagement within the first quarter. And somewhere in the middle of explaining her influencer vetting process, Juliana realized she'd stopped being nervous. The suit felt like armor, yes, but it was armor she didn't actually need. She was brilliant without it. She'd always been brilliant. She just hadn't believed it until a stranger spilled coffee on her and then gave her permission to demand everything. When she finished, the room was silent for 3 seconds that felt like forever. Then Richard leaned back in his chair and exchanged looks with the other partners that Juliana couldn't quite read. "That was exceptional," he said finally. "Genuinely exceptional. The kind of strategic thinking we've been hoping to see from you. We'd like to offer you the Senior Marketing Director position," added Patricia Morrison, the CFO who rarely spoke in meetings and whose approval Juliana had been chasing for 3 years. "Effective immediately. 65,000 base salary increase, full benefits package. And the Reynolds campaign is your first major project to lead." Juliana's mind went blank with shock, and then flooded with joy so intense she almost laughed out loud. 65,000. The same number Jordon had offered in a completely different context just 40 minutes ago. The universe had a sense of humor. "I accept," she said, keeping her voice professional despite wanting to scream. "Thank you for this opportunity. I won't let you down." "We know you won't," Richard said. "That's why we're promoting you." Walking out of the Fontainebleau 20 minutes later, official offer letter in her bag and a smile she couldn't control spreading across her face, Juliana pulled out her phone and stared at the business card Jordon had given her. A single phone number, no name, no context, just a connection to a stranger who'd abandoned his own important meeting to help her make hers. She thought about the coffee disaster, about the ruined silk blouse currently balled up in her bag, about the insane chain of events that had led to her wearing a stranger's suit to the most important presentation of her career. Sometimes disasters weren't actually disasters. Sometimes they were the universe's way of forcing you to be brave, to demand everything, to realize you'd always had the power but just needed permission to believe it. Juliana pulled out her phone and typed a text to the number on the card. "I got the promotion. Your suit is apparently very good luck. Thank you for this morning. For all of it." She hesitated for just a moment before adding, "Also, I should probably return your $3,000 suit at some point. When are you free?" She hit send before she could overthink it, then stood in the Miami sunshine wearing borrowed armor and her own hard-won confidence, waiting to see what would happen next. Her phone buzzed 30 seconds later. "Congratulations. Keep the suit. It looks better on you anyway. Dinner tomorrow night? I'd like to hear about your triumph properly, and I owe you a story about why missing my meeting was worth it." Juliana smiled at her phone, at the impossible morning, at the way her life had just shifted in directions she hadn't planned, but suddenly couldn't wait to explore. "Dinner sounds perfect," she typed back. "Fair warning though, I'm apparently very good at causing chaos in expensive hotels. Just so you know what you're signing up for." His response came immediately. "I'm counting on it." Juliana made it exactly 3 blocks from the Fontainebleau before calling Nicole, her hands still shaking with adrenaline from the presentation and the promotion and the text exchange with a man whose last name she'd only just learned from his business card. "I got the promotion," Juliana said the moment Nicole answered. "Oh my God, Jules, that's amazing. I knew you would absolutely kill it. Tell me everything. Wait, are you still wearing the stranger's suit? Did you get murdered? You sound alive, but I need confirmation." "Still alive, still wearing the suit. And Nicole, I need you to do something for me." Juliana paused at a red light, her mind racing faster than Miami traffic. "I need you to Google someone. Jordon Belvin, Belvin, Miami. The penthouse stranger has a name. This is progress. Hold on. I'm Googling." Juliana heard the clicking of keys, then silence that stretched just a bit too long to be comfortable. "Nick, what did you find?" "Okay, so..." Nicole's voice had shifted from excited to carefully neutral, which was never a good sign. "Jordon Belvin, 36 years old, owner of Belvin Properties, which is a massive real estate development company with projects all over South Florida, Multiple properties, legitimate business holdings, very successful on paper. Why do you sound like there's a but coming? Because there's definitely a but coming, Nicole said. Jules, there are like 15 articles here about suspected ties to organized crime. His father, Antonio Belvin, was allegedly connected to the Miami underworld for decades. There are mentions of territorial disputes, federal investigations that went nowhere, a whole Miami Herald piece from 3 years ago about the Belvin family's influence over port operations and shipping. Juliana stopped walking, standing on the sidewalk while tourists flowed around her like water around a rock. Her stomach felt like it was simultaneously floating and sinking. Organized crime. As in, Mafia organized crime. As in exactly that kind of organized crime, Nicole confirmed. The articles are all very carefully worded with lots of allegedly and suspected and no confirmed charges. But Jules, the pattern is pretty clear. This man you borrowed a suit from? He's not just some wealthy businessman. He's potentially one of the most dangerous people in Miami. Juliana thought about Jordon's intensity, the way Marcus had answered his phone immediately with updates about something called the Castellano situation. The casual mention of a meeting involving territory disputes. Things that had seemed slightly odd this morning suddenly took on very different meanings. He invited me to dinner, Juliana said quietly. Tomorrow night. Said he wanted to hear about my triumph and tell me why missing his meeting was worth it. Absolutely not, Nicole said immediately. Jules, I love your adventurous spirit, but this is how true crime podcasts start. Nice, successful woman meets charming, dangerous man, accepts dinner invitation, disappears mysteriously. Hard pass. But Juliana was thinking about the way Jordon had looked at her when she'd asked why he was helping. The raw honesty when he'd talked about his father dying young because he'd never taken time to be human. The choice he'd made to abandon his important meeting, his careful negotiations, his business priorities, just to help a stranger whose morning had imploded. He chose me over his business deal, Juliana said. This meeting he was late for. It was clearly critical. 6 months of planning. And he just walked away from it to help me. Which is either incredibly romantic or incredibly suspicious, Nicole countered. Maybe both, Jules. I'm not saying don't go. I'm saying be very, very careful. Men like that, men with that kind of power and those kinds of connections, they don't do anything without calculating the angles. Juliana pulled out her phone and looked at Jordon's text again. Keep the suit. It looks better on you anyway. Simple words that suggested he'd been thinking about how she looked in his clothes, which shouldn't make her pulse quicken but absolutely did. What if he's just a person? Juliana asked. What if underneath all the suspected connections and the family reputation, he's just someone who made a choice this morning to help someone who needed it? Then he's a very dangerous person, who also happens to be capable of kindness, which doesn't make him less dangerous, Nicole said gently. It probably makes him more dangerous, actually. Because now you're interested. Juliana couldn't deny that. She was interested. Terribly, foolishly, completely interested in the man who'd derailed his morning for hers, who'd given her armor when she needed it most, who'd looked at her like she mattered in a way that had nothing to do with business calculations. I'm going to dinner, Juliana decided. But I'm going to be smart about it. Public place. I'll tell you exactly where I am, and I'll keep my eyes open. And your guard up, Nicole added. Please, Jules, keep your guard up. Men like Jordon Belvin are dangerous precisely because they make you want to let it down. After they hung up, Juliana stood on the Miami sidewalk wearing a suspected crime boss's $3,000 suit, holding a promotion she'd earned through chaos and borrowed confidence, and contemplating a dinner invitation that was either the worst decision she'd ever make or the beginning of something that would change everything. She pulled out her phone and confirmed the dinner before she could overthink it. Tomorrow night sounds perfect. Where should I meet you? Sometimes the worst decisions and the best decisions looked exactly the same until you were already too far in to turn back. The restaurant was called Maria, tucked into a quiet corner of Coral Gables with soft lighting and tables spaced far enough apart that conversations stayed private. Juliana arrived 5 minutes early, wearing a dress she'd bought that afternoon in a burst of promotion, celebration, and nervous energy, deep emerald green that made her feel elegant and slightly brave. Jordon was already there, standing when she approached, and she had a moment to really look at him without coffee disasters and time pressure clouding her perception. Tall, broad-shouldered, with dark hair styled with casual precision, and eyes that tracked her movement across the restaurant with focused intensity. He wore a navy suit that probably cost more than her new monthly salary, and when he smiled, something in her chest did a small flip that had nothing to do with fear and everything to do with attraction she wasn't quite ready to name. "You came," he said, and there was genuine relief in his voice. "I Googled you," Juliana replied, deciding honesty was the only way to navigate whatever this was. "My best friend thinks I'm making a terrible decision being here." Something flickered across Jordon's face, respect mixed with resignation. "Your best friend is probably right." The waiter appeared immediately, deferential in a way that suggested Jordon was either a very good tipper or someone you didn't keep waiting. They ordered wine, appetizers, and then they were alone again with the question hanging between them like smoke. They made it through 20 minutes of surface conversation. Her promotion, his relief that helping her hadn't been for nothing, the absurdity of their coffee collision meet cute, but Juliana could feel the weight of everything unsaid pressing down on the pleasant small talk, and finally she just asked, "Are you actually in the Mafia?" The question landed like a stone in still water. Jordon was quiet for a long moment, his wine glass turning slowly between his fingers, his expression unreadable. Then he met her eyes with a directness that took her breath away. "That depends on your definition of Mafia," he said carefully. "My family's business operates in areas that aren't entirely legal. We have interests in shipping, construction, real estate development. Some of those interests involve agreements with people who solve problems through methods that wouldn't hold up in court. My father built an organization based on power and loyalty, and the understanding that some rules don't apply to people who are strong enough to ignore them." Juliana's heart was hammering, but she kept her voice steady. So yes, Jordon confirmed. "Though I'm working to transition our operations toward legitimate enterprises. The real estate development is real. The properties are legal. But yes, I inherited an organization that includes violence, danger, and moral complexity that doesn't fit neatly into right and wrong." "The meeting you missed yesterday," Juliana said. "The Castellano situation. That was about territory disputes. Peace negotiations, actually," Jordon said, "trying to avoid violence over control of port operations. 6 months of careful diplomacy to prevent a conflict that would have cost lives and drawn federal attention neither organization wanted. I was late, then I missed it entirely, and the negotiations fell apart. My second-in-command had to rebuild trust that took months to establish. Because you helped me instead. Because I chose you instead," Jordon corrected, his eyes holding hers with intensity that made the elegant restaurant feel suddenly smaller, more intimate. "I looked at you in your ruined blouse and your career ending in real time, and for the first time in my adult life I didn't calculate the business cost. I just knew that helping you mattered more than anything else I had planned that morning." Juliana took a slow sip of wine, her mind processing information that should send her running, but instead made her want to understand him more deeply. "Why are you telling me this? You could have lied. Let me believe you're just a successful real estate developer. Because you deserve to know the truth before you decide whether to see me again," Jordon said simply. "My world includes things that would horrify most people. Violence when necessary, loyalty that supersedes law, power that comes with responsibilities and dangers I can't fully protect you from. If you walk away right now, I'll understand. I'll make sure you're never connected to anything that could hurt your career or your safety. But I won't lie to you about who I am." The honesty was more seductive than any lie could have been. Juliana looked at this dangerous man who'd abandoned his carefully planned negotiations to help a stranger, who spoke about violence with calm acceptance but chose peace when possible, who was offering her truth when deception would have been easier. "I should walk away," Juliana said quietly. "Everything logical says I should thank you for dinner and never contact you again. But you're not going to," Jordon said, and it wasn't a question. "I'm not going to," Juliana confirmed, making a choice that felt both reckless and inevitable. "Because yesterday morning you looked at me and saw someone worth disrupting your entire day for, and tonight you're giving me the truth when you could have given me comfortable lies. I don't know what that means yet, but I want to find out." Jordon reached across the table, his hand covering hers, his touch warm and solid and real. "It means you're either the bravest woman I've ever met or the most foolish." "Maybe both," Juliana said, echoing her own words to Nicole. "But I'm staying for dinner, and whatever comes after." Something shifted in Jordon's expression, vulnerability showing through his controlled exterior. "Then let me tell you about my father, about the organization I inherited, about who I'm trying to become, and you can decide if that's someone you want to know." Juliana squeezed his hand, feeling the calluses that suggested his power came from more than just inherited wealth, and nodded. "Tell me everything." And he did. They talked for 3 hours. The restaurant staff never rushed them, never hovered, just quietly refilled water glasses and replaced courses, while Jordon told Juliana about inheriting an empire at 28 when his father died, about the violence he'd witnessed and sometimes participated in, about trying to build something legitimate while still honoring the loyalty and protection his organization provided to people the system had forgotten. "My father used to say that men like us don't get to choose normal lives," Jordon said, his wine glass empty, his guard lower than Juliana suspected he usually allowed. "That power and danger are the price we pay for protecting what's ours." But watching him die at 65, watching my mother grieve a man who'd sacrificed everything for business, I realized that maybe that's not actually true. Maybe we choose our priorities and then pretend we had no choice. "Is that why you helped me?" Juliana asked. "To prove you could choose differently?" "I helped you because looking at your devastated face made me feel something I haven't felt in years," Jordon said with raw honesty. "Human. Connected to someone outside my world. Like maybe there was more to life than territory disputes and loyalty calculations and maintaining power through fear." The waiter brought dessert. Neither of them had ordered. Tiramisu that probably cost $40 and tasted like clouds in espresso. Juliana took a bite and thought about everything she'd learned tonight, about the man sitting across from her who contained multitudes of contradiction. Dangerous and kind, powerful and vulnerable, violent when necessary but choosing peace when possible. She could walk away. Should walk away. Return to her newly promoted life, her safe apartment with Nicole, her career trajectory that didn't include men with suspected organized crime connections and federal investigations. It would be the smart choice, the logical choice, the choice that wouldn't complicate her carefully constructed professional reputation. But she thought about yesterday morning, about Jordon abandoning 6 months of critical negotiations without hesitation to help a stranger whose blouse was ruined, about him giving her a $3,000 suit and telling her to keep it because it looked better on her, about the raw honesty tonight when lying would have been easier and safer and more strategic. "I should walk away," Juliana said, her voice steady despite her racing heart. "Every logical part of my brain is screaming that getting involved with you is dangerous and complicated and could destroy everything I've worked for." Jordon's expression didn't change, but something in his eyes dimmed slightly. Acceptance of rejection he'd clearly been expecting. "I understand. I'm not finished," Juliana interrupted. "Every logical part of my brain says to run. But yesterday you looked at me and saw someone worth disrupting your entire world for. Tonight you trusted me with truth when comfortable lies would have protected you better. You didn't have to tell me about your father, about the violence, about the moral complexity. You could have kept being the charming real estate developer who helped me in a crisis. I don't want you choosing a version of me that doesn't exist," Jordon said quietly. "Exactly," Juliana said, reaching across the table to take his hand, feeling the warmth and strength and the slight tension that suggested he hadn't expected this. "You gave me the truth and let me choose for myself. So I'm choosing. I'm choosing the man who sacrificed his critical business meeting for a stranger over the reputation Google gave you. I'm choosing complicated and dangerous and morally ambiguous because apparently my brain isn't actually in charge when it comes to you." Jordon's grip tightened on her hand, his eyes searching her face like he was trying to memorize every detail. "You're sure? Because once you're in my world, Juliana, getting out safely becomes complicated. People will see you with me and make assumptions. Rivals will calculate whether you're leverage. Your life will change in ways I can't fully protect you from. Then protect me where you can and trust me to handle the rest," Juliana said, surprising herself with the certainty in her voice. "I'm not some fragile thing that needs constant shielding. I've been fighting for everything I have my entire life. I can handle complicated." Something shifted in Jordon's expression. Wonder mixing with desire, mixing with something deeper that neither of them was quite ready to name. He stood abruptly, pulling Juliana to her feet, his hands framing her face with surprising gentleness for someone who'd admitted to violence when necessary. "I'm going to kiss you now," he said, giving her one last chance to refuse, to step back, to choose safety over whatever this was becoming. "Finally," Juliana breathed, and closed the distance between them. The kiss was electric, inevitable, the collision of two people who'd met through disaster and chosen each other despite every logical reason to run. Jordon kissed her like she was precious and dangerous simultaneously, his hands in her hair, her arms wrapped around his neck, both of them completely forgetting they were in a public restaurant until someone nearby cleared their throat politely. They broke apart, breathless, Juliana's lipstick smeared and Jordon's careful composure completely shattered. He looked at her like she'd just changed his entire world, which she supposed she had. "Come home with me," Jordon said, his voice rough with want and hope and vulnerability. "Not for anything except more of this. More conversation, more honesty, more of you choosing me when you absolutely shouldn't." Juliana thought about Nicole's warnings, about true crime podcasts and women who disappeared after making terrible decisions about dangerous men. Then she thought about yesterday's disaster becoming her triumph, about borrowed armor and hard-won confidence, about the universe pushing her toward destiny through chaos. "Take me home," Juliana said, making the choice that would define everything that came after. "And tomorrow you can show me your world. The real one. All of it." Jordon smiled, genuine and unguarded, and completely devastating. "Tomorrow I'll show you everything. Tonight, I just want more of this." He kissed her again, sealing the decision, marking the moment when Juliana Greene chose danger and complication, and a man whose world included violence and power and moral ambiguity that didn't fit neatly into right and wrong. Sometimes the worst decisions were actually the best decisions, disguised as recklessness. Sometimes disasters were just destiny, arriving with terrible timing and perfect results. Juliana had chosen her disaster. Now she'd see what came next. Rosa Belvin's house in Little Havana smelled like sofrito and roasted pork and decades of Sunday dinners that had fed an army. Juliana stood on the front porch wearing a sundress she'd changed into 3 times, her heart hammering as Jordon squeezed her hand reassuringly. "My mother is going to love you," he said. "Maybe too much. I apologize in advance for everything she's about to say." The door flew open before he could knock, revealing a tiny woman with silver-streaked dark hair, bright eyes, and an expression of pure delight. "Mijo, you brought her. The girl from the coffee disaster who made you miss your meeting." "Ma, I told you that in confidence," Jordon said, but he was already being pulled into a hug that somehow involved his mother reaching up to pat his face, while simultaneously inspecting Juliana like she was a painting in a museum. "Juliana, yes? Come in, come in. You're too skinny. Jordon, why didn't you feed her? I raised you better than this." Rosa grabbed Juliana's hand and pulled her into a house that was exploding with noise, delicious smells, and what appeared to be approximately 40 people in a space designed for maybe 15. "Ma, there's like 12 people here, not 40, Jordon said, reading Juliana's overwhelmed expression. 12? 40? What's the difference when you're feeding family?" Rosa countered. "Juliana, this is Jordon's sister Maria, his brother Carlos, his other sister Elena, Carlos's wife Sofia. There are 3 children who are running around here somewhere breaking things. My sister Lucia, her husband Roberto." The introductions became a blur of names and faces and warm hugs from people who treated Juliana like she was already part of the family rather than a woman their son and brother had known for exactly 4 days. She was handed a glass of wine, guided to the kitchen where multiple women were coordinating what looked like a military operation involving rice and beans and plantains, and immediately interrogated with warmth that felt like sunshine. "So you're the one who made Jordon choose a person over business," Maria said, grinning while chopping vegetables with impressive speed. "We've been waiting our entire lives for that to happen." "I didn't make him," Juliana protested. "He just helped me when I needed it." "That's making him," Rosa said with absolute certainty. "My son. He's been all business since his father died. Work, territory, responsibility. Never taking time for life. Then one morning he calls me and says he's late for the Castellano meeting because he's helping a woman whose blouse got ruined and he doesn't even know her name." I knew right then. I told Lucia, I said, "This girl is going to change everything." Juliana caught Jordon's eye across the kitchen, where he was being interrogated by his brothers. He looked relaxed in a way she hadn't seen before, laughing at something Carlos said, stealing plantains from a serving dish and getting his hand smacked by Rosa. This was a completely different side of him. The devoted son, the teasing brother, the man who clearly loved his chaotic family with fierce loyalty. Dinner was chaos in the best way. 14 people crammed around a table meant for 8, food being passed in 3 languages, children telling stories that made no sense, adults talking over each other with affection and volume. Rosa sat Juliana next to Jordon and directly across from herself, positioning that Juliana suspected was strategic. "So Juliana," Rosa said about 45 seconds into the meal, "you want children? I'm not getting any younger and Jordon needs to give me grandchildren before I'm too old to spoil them properly." "Ma," Jordon said, his tone suggesting this was a familiar battle. "We've been dating for 4 days. Your father proposed to me after 3 days," Rosa countered. "When you know, you know. I'm just asking about her general feelings on children. It's conversation. It's interrogation." Maria laughed. "Ma does this with everyone Jordon brings home. Which, by the way, is exactly 2 women in the past decade, so you should feel special." Juliana found herself laughing despite the absurdity. "I like children. In theory, I haven't really thought about the timeline because I just got promoted and I'm still figuring out how dating a man in organized crime works. The table went completely silent. Then Carlos started laughing so hard he choked on his rice. Maria was grinning like Juliana had just passed some crucial test, and Rosa looked absolutely delighted. She knows about the business and she's still here, Rosa said to Jordon with obvious approval. Smart girl, beautiful, successful, and not living in denial. Mijo, you better not mess this up. I'm trying not to, Jordon said, his hand finding Juliana's under the table, his thumb tracing circles on her palm that made her forget about the chaos around them. The rest of dinner was warmth and laughter, and stories about Jordon as a child that he clearly wished his family wouldn't share. Juliana learned he'd been protective of his siblings since he was 6, that he'd cried at every Disney movie, that he'd wanted to be a chef before his father died and responsibility changed everything. Later, helping with dishes while Rosa orchestrated cleanup like a general commanding troops, Juliana felt arms wrap around her from behind. Jordon's chin rested on her shoulder, his voice quiet against her ear. Still sure about choosing complicated? He asked. Juliana turned in his arms, looking at this man who contained violence and tenderness, power and devotion, danger and fierce family loyalty. Your mother already has our wedding planned and named our hypothetical children. I think it's too late to back out now. Jordon laughed, the sound genuine and unguarded, and kissed her softly while his entire family pretended not to watch. Welcome to the family, Juliana Greene, he said. Fair warning, you'll never have peace and quiet again. Good, Juliana said, meaning it. I've had enough quiet to last a lifetime. The meeting took place in a private room at one of Jordon's legitimate properties, a restaurant in Wynwood that closed to the public every Tuesday at noon for what the books called executive planning sessions. Juliana arrived with Jordon to find 5 men already seated around a polished table, their expressions ranging from curious to openly hostile. Gentlemen, Jordon said, his hand resting on Juliana's lower back in a gesture of both support and claim. This is Juliana Greene. She's going to be sitting in on our meetings going forward. The silence was immediate and loaded. Marcus, who Juliana recognized from the coffee disaster morning, nodded politely. The others just stared with the kind of assessment that made her feel like a threat being evaluated for elimination. With respect, boss, said a man whose nameplate read Vincent Moretti. We don't typically bring civilians into strategic planning. Security risk aside, there are discussions that happen here that could complicate her life significantly. Juliana knows what my business entails, Jordon said, his tone leaving no room for argument. She's choosing to be part of my world, which means she needs to understand how it operates. Anyone have a problem with that? No one spoke, but the tension in the room was thick enough to cut. Juliana took a seat next to Jordon, keeping her expression neutral while her heart hammered. These were dangerous men discussing dangerous things, and she was an outsider being forced into their inner circle by association with their boss. The meeting started with financial reports, territory updates, and coded discussions about shipments and distribution channels that Juliana understood were probably not referring to legal goods. She listened without commenting, watching how Jordon commanded absolute authority while still allowing his men to voice concerns and debate strategy. Then Marcus brought up a problem. The West Side operation is hemorrhaging money. We've got the product, we've got the infrastructure, but we can't get market penetration. The local competition has brand loyalty we can't break. We could force them out, suggested another man. His tone suggesting violence was the obvious solution. That draws attention we don't need, Jordon said. We need a different approach. If I may, Juliana said quietly, and every eye in the room turned to her with expressions that ranged from surprise to dismissive irritation. Jordon nodded. Go ahead. You're treating this like a territory problem when it's actually a marketing problem, Juliana said, channeling the confidence that had earned her the promotion. You have a superior product, but no brand differentiation. The competition has customer loyalty because they've built trust and community connection. You need to position yourselves not as the new aggressive player trying to take over, but as the premium alternative that offers something the competition doesn't. Vincent's expression was skeptical. And how exactly do you suggest we do that? Community investment, Juliana said, pulling out her phone to show examples from her Reynolds Cosmetics campaign. You identify what the neighborhood actually needs that the competition isn't providing. Youth programs, small business grants, infrastructure improvement. You become the organization that builds, rather than just extracts. People choose to do business with you because you're actually invested in their community succeeding, not just using it for profit. The room was silent. the men processing this approach that clearly hadn't occurred to them. Marcus leaned forward, his expression thoughtful. That's actually brilliant. We become the good guys. Relatively speaking, while the competition looks like they're just taking without giving back. It works for legitimate businesses, Vincent said, but his tone was less dismissive now. Would it work for our operations? Why wouldn't it? Juliana asked. You're already operating in communities the system has abandoned. If you're the ones who actually improve those communities while doing business there, you build loyalty that's more sustainable than fear or convenience. Plus, it gives you legitimate cover for your presence. Community investment programs look good on paper. Jordon was watching her with an expression that made her pulse quicken. Pride and desire, and something deeper that neither of them had named yet. Juliana runs community programs professionally, marketing and public relations. She knows how to build brand loyalty in overlooked markets. Could transform our entire approach, Marcus said slowly. Make us harder to prosecute too, if we're genuinely investing in communities rather than just extracting from them. The rest of the meeting involved Juliana outlining a strategy that borrowed from legitimate marketing principles and applied them to Jordon's less legal operations. By the end, even Vincent was nodding with grudging respect, and the tension in the room had shifted from hostility to cautious acceptance. After the others left, Marcus lingered by the door. She's good, boss. Smart. Didn't back down even when we were testing her. I know, Jordon said, his eyes never leaving Juliana's face. When they were finally alone, Jordon pulled Juliana into his arms, his kiss fierce and claiming and full of unspoken emotion. You just held your own with 5 of the most dangerous men in Miami. Do you have any idea how incredible that was? I just applied marketing principles to illegal operations, Juliana said, though she was smiling. Not sure that's something to be proud of. It's something to be extraordinary about, Jordon said. They came in ready to dismiss you as a liability and you walked out with their respect. That doesn't happen easily in my world. Juliana thought about the hostile stares, the testing, the way she'd chosen to prove her value rather than shrink from judgment. Your world is complicated, but I'm starting to understand how to navigate it. You're not just navigating it, Jordon said, his forehead resting against hers. You're changing it, making it better, making me better. And in that moment, Juliana realized she wasn't just choosing to be part of Jordon's world anymore. She was actively shaping it, using her skills and intelligence to transform something dark into something that could actually help people. Sometimes choosing complicated meant becoming part of the complication. Sometimes it meant being the one who made complicated beautiful. Juliana was loading boxes into her car outside her Wynwood apartment when she heard a voice she hadn't expected and definitely didn't want to deal with right now. Jules, is that really you? David Chen. Former colleague from her first marketing job, someone she'd dated briefly 3 years ago before realizing they had absolutely nothing in common beyond proximity and convenience. He looked exactly the same. Khakis, button-down shirt, safe haircut. The kind of man who color-coded his calendar and never took risks. David. Hi. Juliana straightened, suddenly very aware that she was wearing one of Jordon's shirts and moving out of her apartment to move into a penthouse owned by a man with organized crime connections. I heard you got promoted at Apex, David said, his smile friendly but his eyes already cataloging the expensive watch on her wrist, the designer bag she'd never have been able to afford before. Congratulations, though I also heard some interesting rumors about who you've been seeing. There it was. Juliana had known this was coming, known that her relationship with Jordon would become gossip in Miami's interconnected professional circles. She just hadn't expected to have this conversation while literally packing up her old life. I'm dating someone, Juliana said carefully. His name is Jordon Belvin. David's expression shifted to something between concern and judgment. The Jordon Belvin? Jules. Everyone knows his family is connected to organized crime. There are federal investigations, allegations of violence, connections to trafficking and extortion. You can't seriously be involved with someone like that. I am seriously involved with him, Juliana said, her voice steady despite the irritation building in her chest. And I'm aware of who he is and what his family business entails. Then you're compromising your integrity, David said with the kind of earnest concern that made Juliana want to scream. You worked so hard to build your career, your reputation. Dating a man like that, getting involved in his world, Jules. You're throwing away everything for someone who's probably using you. Men like him don't actually care about women like us. We're just convenient. Juliana set down the box she'd been holding and faced David fully, her patience officially exhausted. First, don't presume to know anything about my relationship. Second, Jordon isn't using me. He's the man who sacrificed a critical business negotiation to help me when I was a complete stranger whose morning had imploded. He's given me truth when lies would have been safer. He's introduced me to his family, included me in his business strategy, and treated me like an equal partner rather than an accessory. He's a criminal, Jules. He's a man operating in a complicated world, who's actively working to transition his organization toward legitimate businesses, while still honoring the loyalty and protection his people depend on. Juliana countered. Yes, his world includes moral ambiguity and danger, but it also includes fierce family loyalty, community investment, and genuine care for people the system has abandoned. He's more complicated than the label you're trying to put on him. David shook his head with the kind of pity that made Juliana's blood boil. You're being naive. You think you can change him, reform him, but men like that don't change. You're going to get hurt, or worse. And when it all falls apart, don't expect your professional reputation to survive the association. I'm not trying to change him, Juliana said with absolute certainty. I'm choosing him exactly as he is: complicated, dangerous, morally ambiguous, and more genuine than most of the safe men I've dated who pretended to be good while being fundamentally selfish. Jordon showed me who he really was and let me choose for myself. That's more integrity than most people ever offer. So you're really doing this, David said, throwing away your safe, conventional life for a man whose world includes violence and federal investigations. I'm choosing complexity over safety, Juliana said. Love over convenience. A man who sees me as extraordinary over people who think I need to play small to be acceptable. And if that means my life gets complicated and my professional reputation suffers, then that's the price I'm willing to pay. David looked at her like she was a stranger, which Juliana supposed she was. The woman he'd known 3 years ago would never have made this choice. But that woman had also never been seen as valuable enough to disrupt someone's entire world for. I hope you know what you're doing, David said finally. I do, Juliana replied. For the first time in my life, I absolutely do. After David left, Juliana finished loading her car and drove to the Fontainebleau penthouse that was now officially her home. Jordon was waiting when she arrived, immediately helping with boxes while his mother called with decorating suggestions and his sister texted welcome messages. That evening, standing on the balcony overlooking Biscayne Bay with Jordon's arms wrapped around her, Juliana thought about the coffee disaster that had seemed like the worst moment of her life. The ruined silk blouse, the panic, the collision with a stranger that had derailed both their mornings. What are you thinking about? Jordon asked, his chin resting on her shoulder. About how a coffee disaster introduced me to my future, Juliana said, leaning back against his chest. About how sometimes the biggest messes lead to the best things. Do you regret it? Jordon asked quietly. Choosing complicated? Juliana turned in his arms, looking at this man who'd changed her entire world through one impulsive choice to help a stranger. Not for a single second. You? Choosing you over that meeting was the best decision I ever made, Jordon said, kissing her softly. Even if Marcus still brings it up every time he wants to win an argument. Juliana laughed, the sound carrying across the Miami night, full of joy and certainty and the absolute knowledge that she'd chosen right. Sometimes disasters weren't actually disasters. Sometimes they were just destiny arriving with terrible timing and perfect results. She'd walked into the Fontainebleau that morning 3 weeks ago wearing a $250 blouse and carrying 3 years of careful planning. She'd walked out wearing a stranger's suit and a completely different future. Now she was home, choosing love over safety, complexity over convention, and a man whose world included danger and moral ambiguity, but also fierce loyalty and genuine devotion. The coffee had ruined her blouse but saved her life, and Juliana Greene wouldn't change a single moment of the beautiful mess that had brought her here. Thank you for spending this time with Juliana and Jordon. Thank you for believing that a spilled cup of coffee can change 2 lives forever. Thank you for understanding that sometimes the messiest beginnings lead to the most beautiful destinations. Subscribe now and never miss a story about love, destiny, and the beautiful disasters that change everything.